Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Climate Fusion Talk. I am Lawrence Yan, the founding partner of MIH Capital, an Asia-based climate tech venture capital fund. I'm also the host for this episode. Today, we're talking to Steve Mayfield, the founder of Algenesis Materials. Algenesis is the maker of biodegradable polyurethane based out of San Diego. Steve was also a professor of biology at UCSD, and he is a four-time startup founder. The topic of the day is plastic and microplastic. These are literally everywhere. Whenever we think about plastic waste, the typical image that comes to mind are pictures of plastic bottles scattered across oceans and beaches. Well, erase that image because it is a complete misrepresentation. Looking down the list of top microplastic contributors, water bottles are nowhere near the top of the list. A few years ago, when I first started looking into the plastic pollution, it completely caught me off guard too. Top microplastic polluters are synthetic textile, footwear, and car tires. Unfortunately, we have not seen a great replacement material for car tires. Synthetic textile is a discussion for another day. But today, let's talk about shoes. Every year, the world produces more than 24 billion pairs of shoes, and over 20 billion pairs were discarded. Majority of the discarded footwear, around 95% of those, are incinerated or buried into the landfill. Eventually, these become microplastic pollutions released into the atmosphere or microplastic seeping into soil and underground water. Furthermore, daily abrasion and wear and tear of the shoe soles directly turn to atmospheric microplastic. So when I met Steve and the Algenesis team of biochemists and algae scientists back in 2022, Steve talked about how he wanted to clean up the footwear industry by formulating a truly backyard soil and ocean biodegradable polyurethane. Step by step, no pun intended, the Algenesis team is making that into a reality. They're now making shoes that can fully biodegrade into natural environment. Without further ado, let's meet Steve. All right, so hello, Professor Mayfield. Thank you for extending this special office hour with us.
Oh, you're quite welcome, Lawrence. Happy to be here.
It's been a little more than 2 years since I started going down this rabbit hole called microplastic.
Yeah.
And I'm actually very glad that I have the professor here in this hole with me. Otherwise, I think it could get pretty grim pretty quickly. So, let's just get into it. Let's talk about microplastic because, as I
Sure.
mentioned, I think the more I dig myself into this rabbit hole, the more conclusive it becomes.
Yeah.
I kind of feel like microplastic is one of the most challenging nut to crack, in our generation or even in the next
Yeah.
generation, because it is also a nut that we have to crack. Otherwise, I think the consequences will be quite significant as well. And also, we might find ourselves in a movie scene where we're buried underneath some dystopian world, underneath a lot of trash and plastic.
Yeah.
So, of course, I am a climate tech investor and I have to be optimistic. Don't we all have to be optimistic? But at the end of the conversation, I hope we can bring some more optimism, to kind of us solving this microplastic crisis.
Okay.
Right.
All right.
So, please, we have spoken numerous times over the past 2 years, but I'd love to start with your relationship with microplastic, how it got started, where you guys met, the
Yeah.
whole,
Yeah, exactly.
the party where
Oh,
you guys met at, the cocktail you had, when you
exactly.
recognize the problem, the
Yeah.
severity of the problem, and when you decide to build a new material that could
Yeah.
possibly solve the problem.
Yeah. Yeah. Let me give everybody a brief history of plastic and then microplastics, right? It's funny when I talk to students, I'll often hear them say, "Oh, look what these horrible chemical companies have done." Or even with the climate change, look what these, oil companies have done. Look what these, and I think people imagine, oh, there are these evil people who live in these giant corporations and spend all their time thinking about how they're going to destroy the planet. And that's actually not the way we always get into trouble. We get into trouble because everything we do has consequences. And sometimes those consequences don't show up immediately, right? Like if you pick up a rattlesnake, you're going to get bit, right? And that consequence shows up immediately. But a lot of things you do in your life, it takes a while before it shows up. So how did plastics come about? Plastics are not that old, right? They were only invented in the 20th century, right? Well, polyurethane, the one we work on, was invented in the late like 1930s, right? But most of them really didn't come into use until after World War II. And they did a couple really great things, right? And they continue today. This is why we use them today. I go into my kitchen, I've got plastic film that I put over food. It's a great way to protect it, right? Like whatever, I have cheese when I cut some of the cheese. Well, if I just put it back in the refrigerator, it would dry out and that cheese would be wasted in a couple of days. So I wrap it in plastic. Yes, now I do have wax coated paper. So there are things we can do to make it more sustainable. But by and large, my point is this: plastics do a wonderful thing,
Yeah.
right? Wonderful things. They do many things, right? Look at the elastomers in our shoes. Running shoes are unbelievable. A person who might weigh 100 kilograms landing on that shoe 70,000, 100,000 times and it still works. That stuff's amazing, right? So we didn't start out, let's make plastic trash and plastic pollution. It was like, look at these cool things that they can do. Then the plastic industry's job was, what other cool things can they do? How do we expand these and how do we make them cheaper? And they were very successful at that. They made plastic super cheap, super abundant, and they did a lot of really cool things, whether it was paint, whether it was car tires, you name it, right? And they just weren't thinking, well, what are we going to do with this at the end of their life? Now, there's kind of no excuse. We should have been. As a scientist, we should always be trying to think a little farther ahead than the average consumer. So we should have been thinking about this, but we didn't. Okay. Now, fast forward 70 years from the 1950s until today, and look at the amount of plastic out there. So it's not that any individual plastic container is a problem, it's that they're so ubiquitous. In the United States alone, 8 billion cups are sold at Starbucks every year, 8 billion. And they are neither recyclable nor compostable. They just go into the trash can and they're coated with plastic. That becomes microplastics to get into the environment. Now, are there other ways we can do it? Of course there are. I don't have Starbucks cups at home. I have a ceramic mug that I use every day. We could easily have done that in Starbucks. But the reason we didn't is because 20 years ago, 30 years ago, it wasn't on our radar how bad this stuff was. And they became super convenient and really cheap. So we got used to using them. So, number one, evil scientists did not make these things. Naive scientists made these things. And consumers aren't evil for using them, but maybe they're lazy. Okay. So that's number one. Okay. Number two, we collectively as a society decided many years ago that our goal should be 3 or 4% economic expansion every year, growth, as we call it. Well, how do you keep that up? You keep that up by people making things and buying them. So we became a consumer society and we mistook physical products for happiness, right? And this is the reason Amazon, United States, is so enormous. It's like Christmas every day. I just one click my little button, and the next day a package shows up, and I'm so excited. But then 15 minutes later, I forgot about it. So I get that little shot, you know, of chemicals in my brain that tells me I should be happy, and then it quickly goes away. But no worries, I can just order something again with one click. So it's really multiple problems that are layered on top of it. That and that our population is now 8.5 billion people, right? When I was born, okay, I'm 69, just so everybody knows. When I was born, there was only 1.5 billion people on the planet. Now there are 8.5 billion people. You think about that for a second. 6 billion people showed up in my lifetime.
Yeah.
that were not there when I was. Now I'm part of the problem. Okay. I was one of the baby boomers, as they call it. Okay. But it's those compounding of things, right? It's the number of people times the amount they're consuming
Yep.
times the unsustainability of the products we're using, whether that is petroleum, fossil fuels, or whether that is plastics, or whether that is just gross overconsumption, like I'm flying around everywhere on my private jet. Okay. So problem number one is how do we deal with that? And that requires a lifestyle change. Okay.
Mhm.
Let me give you one of my favorite quotes that I actually got from the vice president of Exxon, right? Before I made biopolymers, we were working on biofuels
Uh-huh.
and we had a collaboration with Exxon. And this is back in 2010 and 15 years ago now. And he said to me, I asked him one day, I said, hey, are you worried about, peak, you know, oil and that you're going to run out of oil someday? Are you worried about climate change? Are you worried about, what are you worried about? Why are you here working on biofuels, Exxon? And he said, well, look, I worry about all those things and they're all true. Climate change is real. Peak oil is real. We need to do something about this. We need a more sustainable planet. I have kids. I have grandkids, right? I think about these things. But I'll tell you the real reason I'm here is because people only operate under two modes. They do nothing and then they overreact. They will see a problem staring them in the face and they will hope somebody else is going to fix it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But at some point they realize, oh, nobody else is fixing this. I'm doomed. And then they overreact and they do irrational things. Okay.
Mhm.
Then his little punchline was, and every time they do it, they take it out on me, meaning Exxon. So, but his line was true, right? And
Yeah.
and I look at it now and I'm like, we all know that there's this enormous problem with microplastics. We individually could all do something about it tomorrow. Stop buying plastic, full stop. Don't buy plastic containers, don't buy plastic cups, don't buy, you could all do that. This wouldn't kill you. I have a one of those metal water things that I drink out of. I don't need plastic cups to drink out of. I have ceramic mugs for my coffee. There's lots of ways you can reduce it, but I haven't eliminated it completely because every time I buy something, it comes wrapped in plastic.
Yeah.
Now, Lawrence, as you know, we make shoes, and now we wrap our shoes when we sell them in cardboard or paper,
Hmm. Hmm.
right? It's like, nope, no more. Plastic is cheaper.
Hmm.
It's super convenient, but we just won't use it. Cost us a little more. So there's plenty of things we can do it as individuals. Okay. So back to your question though, which was how did we get involved in microplastics? When we started out, we were thinking we have to change the end of life of our plastic products. We were not thinking microplastics.
Right.
We were thinking, oh my God, look at the ocean pollution. Look at the garbage patches. Look
Hmm.
at the flip-flops and sneakers floating around in the ocean. Look at them washed up on beaches. So we were simply thinking gross plastic pollution, meaning large objects that are in the wrong place. Okay. And we knew that if we made a shoe made from plants and biodegradable, hey, at least if they get out in the wrong place, if somebody loses their slides or their flip-flops, they get washed in the rain down the street and end up in the ocean, hey, these things will degrade in about a year. So we're like, okay, that won't be that sort of forever plastic accumulating into the marine environment, right? And ours do that. They work on that. Now, that doesn't mean you should be irresponsible and throw your shoes just into the environment. You should still take care of them, even the biodegradable one. But anyway, okay. Then about 2 or 3 years ago, we were sitting around and we said, hey, if our shoes biodegrade, then any microplastics that happens to abrade off those, and everyone should know that when you're walking around on your shoes, you're abrading micro. When you say your shoes wore out, what does that really mean? What that really means is you abraded them away. That material doesn't disappear. You grind it off the bottom of your shoe and it ends up in the environment. What does
Right.
it end up as? It ends up as microplastics.
Hmm.
So we were starting to read, like everybody else, all of these scientific reports. I remember the first one that really alarmed me was about 3 years ago when some MDs in Utah reported that they were looking at heart patients who had died of stroke or heart attack, and they noticed that there was a large amount of microplastic in their arteries, in the plaques on their arteries. And so they did a bigger study and they said, hey, there's a correlation between people with heart disease and the amount of microplastics in your plaques, right?
Yeah.
And okay, that's just a correlation. That's not cause and effect. That just means that, hey, people who've had these things tend to have a lot of them.
Well,
So
it
that was
makes
about three.
sense. It makes sense.
Yeah, and since then, that literature has blown up, as you've seen, right? Now you can't go, like literally, you cannot go a week without seeing 3 or 4 articles
Yeah.
on where microplastics are now in your blood, in your brain, plus everywhere in the environment, in the
Yeah.
water, in the air, you name it. Okay, so combine those two things together that we had biodegradable plastics and we were starting to see this. Hey, let's go and measure what happens to our shoes, right? Like here, we can have show and tell on this shoe, right? Here's my shoe. I've had these things for almost 3 years now. Well, where did that heel go? That heel just got abraded away from me walking. It's microplastics in the environment. But we went and measured, and what happens to ours within about 100 days? They completely disappear. They're completely eaten by organisms. In fact, when you take our shoe and put it into smaller pieces, that actually biodegrades faster.
Mhm.
Okay? So big things are kind of slow to biodegrade because the organisms have to eat on them from the outside. Okay? Okay, so if I have biodegradable materials, they're not going to cause microplastics. We kind of knew this. Nobody ever had, never have I seen a report that said, hey, when we were doing autopsies on people with heart attacks, we noticed a lot of cellulose accumulating in their plaques, right? Yet wood, paper, cellulose has been around for at least 800 million years,
Yeah.
much longer than we have. And that doesn't seem to be causing a problem in the environment, nor does wool, nor do all the rest of the biodegradable polymers that are normally found in nature. So we kind of had this idea that if you have a biodegradable material, it's not going to form microplastics. And we proved that, we demonstrated it and we published it. And since then, other people have shown, yep, sure enough, those things do not form persistent microplastics. So that's how we got into the sort of microplastic realm. Just looking at the consequences that other people in the medical industry were starting to look at and saying, okay, this is a potential solution to that,
Yeah.
right? And that making biodegradable ones would get around it. So that's where they came from. Now, we started this whole conversation by saying, maybe fuel, maybe energy is a solvable problem. It seems
Mhm.
like it kind of is, whether it's photovoltaics or wind or fusion, or we have lots of ways to make energy, and they all seem to be progressing pretty well. But what do you do about the microplastics, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Now, if we could convert today to every plastic we have out there being biodegradable, then at least all of our future generation of those microplastics would kind of be solved,
Mhm.
right? They would go into the environment, but they would be quickly biodegraded, kind of problem over. But there's 1 ton of plastic in the environment for every person on this planet, right? 8.5 billion tons of plastic are someplace
Incredible.
out in the environment. How do we get rid of those, right? I don't know, right? That is. Uh, I had a conversation with a group of students from Singapore a couple of weeks ago.
Huh?
They had actually they were inventing enzymes that could biodegrade low density polyethylene, LDPE.
Mhm.
LDPE is not biodegradable because it doesn't exist in nature. So things that exist in nature, there's always something that'll eat them. Doesn't matter what it is. If it's been around for a few million years, some organism has evolved to
Yeah.
eat them. But that doesn't mean that we can't evolve other things to eat them, right? So things like nylon, low density polyethylene, polypropylene, these are not bonds that are found in nature. So right now they don't biodegrade, but it doesn't mean we couldn't engineer or develop enzymes to degrade these things, right? So that's what they were doing. They were specifically working on low density polyethylene, and they had some enzymes that looked like they were starting to chew those things up.
Mhm.
So their question to me was, could they develop organisms that would make these enzymes so that they could use the enzymes to recycle low density polyethylene to enzymatically or chemically recycle it as opposed to taking it and melting it and recasting it into a new thing, right? And so I said, yeah, I said, I think that's a good idea, but let me tell you something that's way more important than that. If you could make an organism that secreted that enzyme and you could apply that organism into the environment, maybe there's a chance that enzyme could secrete into the environment and degrade the microplastics
Mhm.
that are already there. Shockingly enough, they hadn't thought about that. They're like, wait, what? Now, it's that would be great for the environment. It's tough to come up with a business model. You'd have to get somebody to pay you to clean up the environment. We're not very good about that, right? But at any rate, at least it gave me the idea, okay, wait a minute, maybe there are technologies that can be applied at a world scale to address the existing microplastics and plastics that are out there, while simultaneously we switch from non-bio-based, non-degradable polymers to bio-based and biodegradable polymers. And if we do those two things at the same time, then I think we have a way to address both the existing plastic pollution and stop generating future plastic pollution.
Yeah. Yeah. Hold that thought on biodegradability. But
Okay.
what you were saying, there's something I agree with and something I disagree with.
Okay.
So when you talk about, changing the lifestyle, there are 8.5 billion people on the earth. There are probably between 100 million to a billion people who could say, yes, let's do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think for the rest of 7 billion people are going to find whatever's the cheapest, the most convenient. So I personally believe that lifestyle change is going to be a difficult push. But what I
Yeah.
do agree with is I think it has to be a fundamental technology shift.
Yeah.
That only if we can change the material or find better ways to recycle, to dispose, to discard, to
Yeah.
have better environments to landfill, better materials to landfill. Otherwise, I think it's just not going to change the fact that plastic is so ubiquitous, it's
Yeah.
so useful, it's
Yeah.
so multifunctional, and it's so cheap at the end of the
Yeah.
day.
Yeah.
So,
So you're dead right that it's much easier to adapt to things when you're rich because you can get a replacement even if it's more expensive and you're okay with that. Whereas if you just don't have the money, you're right, it's hard to do. But I will challenge you on this. Let me give you the perfect example of that is electric cars.
mhm.
Right? Here in the United States, we love, well, Tesla. We love Tesla. We love electric cars now, right? Because when you get them, they're high performance. They are not cheap. They are not cheaper than internal combustion. And yes, they're less polluting, but you have to be a rich person to afford one of that. You're a poor person here. You're not buying one of those. You're not putting a 240, volt rapid charging plug in your front of your house or in your garage. I did, right? Because I'm a rich guy, right? So I'm a professor. I can afford that, right? But you're right. So you're dead right on that part. And here's the big but on that. Consumption does not equal happiness,
Right.
right? I went to Bali 20 years ago before it became super popular, right? And I'm a surfer. So I've gone to, and Bali's got really good surf. And it's just a beautiful tropical island. So friends of mine who were surfers had been there. And we were just talking about where should we go on vacation? And then everybody said, oh, Bali's amazing. It's magical. It's
Mhm.
enchanted. It's whatever, right? And I'm like, yeah, okay, I'm not sure what that means, but everybody likes it. I'm going to go there. And my wife wanted to go, and my sons were like, yeah, sure, we don't. Tropical island, yeah, we'll go. They were teenagers then. So, so we went down there, and lo and behold, it was enchanted. They were probably the happiest people I've ever met.
Mhm.
They didn't have cars. They didn't have Starbucks. They didn't have plastic cups. Well, wait, how could they be happy if they didn't have all those things? And the reason is not simple, but it's because physical conveniences were not how they defined happiness. They defined happiness in a much more spiritual way. They sing and they dance and they chant and they pray and they fly kites above their house to have protective spirits in them. And they welcome people on the streets and they try to understand, okay, so part of our problem is that we have to learn to define happiness that is not equal to economic growth of just buying more things, right? Having a t-shirt in 27 different colors doesn't really make you happy, right?
Unless it costs you $1.50 each.
Well, okay, but that's the thing. We define consumption as our stated economic goal. In the United States and most of the Western world, we want a 3% increase in growth. You consumers have to do your job. You have to go out and buy stuff,
Yeah.
right? And then once consumers had to go buy stuff, then capitalism naturally supplies that, and then the cheapest supplier wins, right? So I would say that I think we can make lifestyle changes. I think they should start with people who have the money to afford them, right? But then that will propagate through the rest of society. Now, it still takes a while to do that, but I think that's our responsibility. But that's our responsibility as people who are educated, who are well off. We should be the ones setting the tone, not demanding other people to do it, right?
Absolutely. I guess on a tangent here, now imagine if the lobbyists from BYD can get BYDs into the US
Yeah,
and selling $10,000 electric vehicles. Couple that with SMRs or the clean energy sources, that will
yeah,
also be a game changer. But I think at some point, technology and then scaling the technology to bring the cost down, I think ultimately that will be the winning formula to
yeah.
get rid of these problems that we're looking at today.
Well, and the other problem, which is in all new technologies, you can't get cheap prices without having large scale production.
Yeah.
So it requires economy of scale. But you can't get economy of scale without having cheap products. So you're stuck in this chicken or egg problem. Well, how do I increase sales if my product's expensive? How do I get the price of my product down if I can't increase sales? So because of that, you have this natural slow integration of things. You get people who are willing to pay a premium because they want the latest cool technology. And then over time, as more and more people buy that, you get an economy of scale and start to reduce the price. That allows more people to enter it. So governments can play a huge incentive here. We did this in the electric car, right? With the electric cars, we gave subsidies to people, right? And we said we want to introduce them. And because of that, electric cars
It worked.
up until
Yeah.
up until 8 months ago were being introduced at a pretty good clip
Yeah.
everywhere in the world,
Yeah.
even the United States, right? That slowed down a little bit, but only a little bit, right? I think the political climate here in the United States and other places too, but primarily driven by here in the United States, is to sort of be, anti-sustainable, anti-climate change. But that's only skin deep, right? What
Yeah.
I think most people in the States have done, most companies have done, they continue to worry about climate change. They continue to worry about, equity and diversity. They worry about all those things. They just call them something different now,
Yeah.
right? So we don't trigger those people that are offended by it.
They call it national defense.
Yes, exactly.
I do want to, this is a perfect segue into what I also want to talk about, which is messaging. Right. One thing I do learn a lot from you is, what is the actual scientific way of looking at biodegradable materials?
Yeah,
I think today a lot of fossil fuel companies have the incentives to deliver a positive, but
yeah,
may not necessarily be a correct message,
yeah,
i.e., some items may have a recycle symbol on it, but it may not be recyclable at all. Some
yeah,
materials may have a biodegradable certification on them, but they may not be naturally biodegradable.
yeah,
Uh, I would love to, hear more about that from your perspective, from a science perspective, and from a consumer perspective, kind of how that's
yeah,
affecting the whole proliferation of plastic, and trying to, um, I can't say guide, but then like share some light on, how do we actually overcome these kind of counter messages coming from the fossil fuel players?
yeah. Again, I'll tell you a story from before. One of the things that I remember, even when I was a kid, when we were trying to change pollution standards in California, right? And I remember one of the actors back then saying, well, the problem is that the polluters have jobs and therefore have voters,
Mhm.
whereas the non-polluters don't exist yet. So here's a constituent which is making internal combustion dirty internal combustion engines. There's lots of jobs. Those people are going to fight to defend their jobs. And even though everybody else would benefit from having cleaner engines, there's no jobs in cleaner engines. They're over here. So because of that, there's this natural, well, I don't know, natural is the right word, but there's a conflict between those groups where it's hard to change incumbent processes or incumbent jobs. Look at coal miners. Good Lord. Coal miners hate being coal miners. Nobody wants to go down in a dark coal mine, but it's your job. And in this country, in the United States, we still defend those. And you're just like mind blowing. Take those people and train them to do something else. They don't want that job. All right. And yet we fight for that. But anyway, back to your question, which gets back to the messaging part, right? Which is you could make the coolest product in the world. And if you can't convince a consumer that it's cool, they're not going to buy it. Your product's not going to be successful and it's going to die. Okay. But on the other hand, if you make kind of a crappy product, but you're really good at marketing, that's likely to be successful too. What that means is that for me, what I try to do is, okay, now I have two challenges. I got to make the coolest product in the world. Then I've got to get the coolest marketing in the world. And it's unfortunate. As a scientist, sometimes, I mean, growing up as a scientist, I was always trained, seek the truth, but don't advertise yourself. Like they actually used to frown on people. The expression used to be, that guy's too slick, right? He's a salesman. He's not a scientist. And now in retrospect and looking back on that, oh man, were we scientists naive? We were idiots, right? Because if you don't, like I said, coolest invention in the world still has to be sold to people
Yeah.
in order to be implemented in order to change the planet. You don't change the planet with a great publication. You don't change the planet with a great idea. You change the planet with a great product. In order to make a great product, people have to buy it. The iPhone changed the world, right? It changed the world because there are, I don't know, 8 billion. Does everybody have one? I have one. I think most people have one. But anyway, the smartphone changed the world because everyone bought it.
Yeah.
And how did that come about? That came about because Apple and other companies, but primarily Apple, they were the slickest marketers on the planet.
Mhm.
Man, they made you want that thing. We have to do the same thing. That shouldn't be a tactic that we say we're above that. We're above that. I just make this great product and I scientifically explain it to people, and they better be smart enough to know what it is. When I was a kid and I opened the hood of my 64 Ford Falcon, which is the car my dad gave me when I was in high school, right? Because it was this old beater car, and he's like, I don't want it anymore. My brother and I could take that engine apart in one day and put it back together. They were that simple. Like you looked under that hood and you knew what everything was.
Yeah.
You knew what the carburetor was. You knew what the distributor was. You knew what spark plugs were. You knew what you name it. They were all there, right? I open the hood of my car now and I'm like, I don't even recognize anything in there. I don't even see, I mean, I have an electric car, but even when I had one with an internal combustion engine, it just doesn't look the same.
Yeah.
How does an iPhone work? You tell me how an iPhone works. And if you opened it up, would you know that? No. Why? Because science has become so sophisticated
Yeah.
that I can no longer look at it and by first principles understand how it works.
Mhm.
That means I am putting a belief in the people who are making and selling the iPhone that the science and the technology behind it are good. Now I'm going to prove that over time, but when I'm first looking at it, it's a marketing decision I make, not a scientific one. And so we have to be the same. I can't hold my shoe up and go, look, just look at it and you know how great it is. Of course not, right? It looks like every other shoe. It feels like every other shoe when you put it on. It has to. If it didn't, it wouldn't be a shoe, right? So that means I have to educate people and I have to market to those people about how cool this product is,
Hmm.
right? And I think as scientists, we have to get out of this mindset. The purity of my science will save me. No, it won't, honey, right? You've got to get down. You've got to learn capitalism. You have to learn the way marketing works. You have to learn the way social media works. Now we have a huge advantage nowadays, okay? Greenwashing, as you know, has been an enormous problem throughout the world.
Hmm.
Okay. Now with social media, I won't name the company, but an Australian company had made a raincoat a couple years ago.
Hmm.
And they said, oh, it's made from nylon, but it's biodegradable.
No, it's not.
Exactly. So we
It
saw
doesn't
this,
exist.
we saw this, and we sent them an email. Because we kind of knew them. Like they weren't friends or anything like that, but we'd met them. We sent them an email and I said, you guys, nylon is not biodegradable, right? They put in molecules that are UV sensitive that break under UV and you're fragmenting your nylon to become microplastics. It is not biodegradable.
Right.
And they said, Steve, thanks for the call, but you're wrong. This technology, I won't say where it came out of, but this technology, and we've tested it and we've seen it. And they actually had on their website a picture of their jacket falling apart into little pieces. Okay. They sold that thing for about a year. Then a group in Germany said, wait a minute, nylon's not biodegradable. They bought the thing and then demonstrated that what it was really doing was fragmenting and just turning into microplastics. And they did a very elegant study. They showed it. Look, it's not disappearing. No CO2 is coming off. The mass is actually not decreasing. It's just fragmenting. This caused an enormous, then they published this on social media. This caused an enormous backlash. The stock in that company dropped 20% in one day. This was $1 billion loss for these guys. Okay. So social media now gives us an ability to catch people who are pure marketing,
Yeah.
right? That doesn't mean that if you do the right thing, you shouldn't market it. You absolutely should. But if you're doing the wrong thing, or if you're kind of trying to do greenwashing, it's much easier to get caught nowadays. And because of social media, because one person on a YouTube channel can now bring down a big company, right?
That's incredible. I mean, the day I realized, I think I forgot how many years ago it was, when I realized that all of the big oils are the sponsors behind the recycling ads. It's kind of like telling a kid that there was no Christmas. And I'm not sure if you heard about this, but in Taiwan, where I'm from, of course, they actually banned PLA materials in the
Yeah,
market because in Taiwan, we do not have a single industrial compost facility
yep,
available,
yep,
meaning that you're just paying for more expensive plastic that sticks around for just as long as the PETs and other materials. So
yep,
I think a lot of these kind of misconceptions are, like you said, the right messaging um, could debunk a lot of these
yeah,
messages out there. And what's really recyclable, what's really biodegradable.
right.
On this note, so what else can Solid do? Solid being, of course, our Algenesis biodegradable PU and TPU.
Yeah.
You're looking at footwear to start.
What
Um,
we're to start. Now we've got, as you've seen, we've got phone cases, and those are looking pretty cool. We think those will be on the market early next year. And then we've got coated fabrics. So we could make like a raincoat out of it, but we can also make the first product we're going to make is a travel bag. You'll get one pretty soon, Lawrence. We're in development on them right now. So this is just a canvas duffel bag coated in our thermoplastic polyurethane, TPUs. That's what that means. And all that means is that it forms that plasticky kind of coating on it, which is waterproof. So
mhm.
now we have a canvas waterproof bag. So at the end of its life, which might be 5 years, might be 10 years, I don't know how long till you wear it out. I suppose it depends how much you travel. You could throw that in a home compost facility, not an industrial compost facility, and that will completely biodegrade away. But in the meantime, as that bag is shedding microplastics and microfibers, because it's cotton canvas, those biodegrade, and because it's our TPU, those biodegrade. So you're not throwing these things out. So I think that unfortunately, we were just in another conversation earlier today with a group that wanted to know, could we make single-use plastic like, the packaging for it? And we could, but it's much too expensive.
Right.
Right. Now, that doesn't mean that we shouldn't think about that. And as we go to bigger and bigger scale and our costs come down, that is something we can look at. But the nice thing about, or the reason we picked polyurethanes to work on is because they're called an elastomer.
Hmm.
That means they stretch and snap back to their original shape. That's kind of that's kind of rare among plastics.
Hmm.
Like things like nylon. Nylon bends and kind of comes back,
Yeah.
but like polyethylene and polypropylene, they're not elastic. You can't pull on those things and they snap back. So that ability to snap back is super cool. It's what allows you to make spandex, those stretch pants that everybody loves nowadays. It allows you to make phone cases that twist and bend and deform, shoes, raincoats. I mean, think about that. That thing, you have to be able, especially if it's one of the ones that's used for what they call active
Yeah.
sports, right? So if you're gonna wear it to go hiking or skiing or play golf in the rain, whatever. So we'll primarily focus on things that are high value polymers. But we're also starting to think, could we get our polymers cheap enough that they could replace single-use plastic, right? I think that would kind of be the ultimate goal. We can't do it right now because as a startup company, Lawrence, we can't work on everything. If
Yeah.
you work on everything, you end up accomplishing nothing.
Yeah.
So we have to be focused. We're focused on footwear out the door, now phone cases and injection molded products, and very soon coated products like raincoats and waterproof, fabric for luggage or whatever, right? That'll be kind of the ones as we go down the line. And then sometime in the distant future, we'll get into the commodity things like single-use packaging.
Yeah. 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 Like we're talking about, I think it does take more than a startup, right? I think it takes, government
Yeah,
policies behind it. It
yeah,
takes corporate pressure behind a lot of the things. I mean, heck, a lot of the reason why tech companies in Taiwan are looking for carbon credit is not because they want to.
right.
It's because Apple is knocking on their doors and say, "Hey guys, you got to make sure all of your carbon emissions are offset by these credits."
Yeah,
And that's where the real demand is coming from, not because they have a kind of
yeah,
goodwill and say, "Hey, I want to, buy credits to offset
yeah,
these emissions that we produced." So a lot of it
yeah,
has to come from, the entire kind of supply chain,
yeah.
consumer, the entire stack needs to be involved in this.
Yeah, look, that's a super good point. And the reason, but let me tell you, the reason those guys can't do that is because that is an expense. And if they were the only ones doing it and their competitors weren't doing it, very soon their competitors would pass you. So that's why legislation is so important. It evens the playing field. You say to everybody, hey, everybody. Right now, Apple's doing it, but those should be, that should be the UN actually. I was super disappointed when we came out of this last plastics negotiation with no deal signed. That was primarily because of the United States. We know that.
Right,
You
it's
know,
a different conversation. I went to the UNEP a couple years ago at Nairobi, and it wasn't very encouraging, let's put it this way.
mhm,
These are countries with votes trying to, let's not use the word extort, but something close to that
yeah,
to make sure some agendas from some major countries are
yeah,
going across the finish line. But
yeah,
it's a trade exhibition. It's not a kind of
yeah,
convention or a international forum that could get things done on the good well-being
yeah.
of a particular subject.
But let me give you that. Let me finish with the optimistic comment on that. And I will go back to what the guy from Exxon told me. The world only operates under two modes. They do nothing and then they overreact.
Yeah.
Right now, we're still in the do nothing mode. And what I'm optimistic of is that the young kids who are coming up and are getting now political clout in this country, in the United States now, I'm sure you've seen this. The young kids have had enough of us old white guys ruining the planet. They're starting to stand up, and there's going to be big political change coming, brought about partly by our current administration, right? A response to him is going to be that we're going to get a changing of the guard,
Right.
right? And when those guys come up, I'm hopeful that what they're going to say is enough is enough. You guys did nothing. We're going to do something. Now, they will likely overreact. They'll probably take it out. They'll probably take it out on me and my generation. But you know what? We kind of deserve it, right? We kind of deserve to have to pay a little bit for what we've done to the planet.
Well, like you said, you talk to hundreds of students every year, from different places. Of course, like what we were talking about today, this is a generational problem. And, you and I, even myself, being just a few years younger than you are, it's probably something that we can solve in our lifetime. But then it's how we could relight the fire and make sure that it continues
Yeah.
we work on this even after, we leave the world. So when you talk to students, of course, and I think the students today are looking at this different under a different lens than we were. I think when we were younger, this wasn't as critical or as severe or as pressing as it is today. Now
Yeah.
everything's under the sunlight, and people are talking about it. I'm not, I wouldn't be surprised if they're under some kind of a hopelessness even, say, what can we do about it? Right? Today
Yeah.
we have politically, this is not in the right conversation right now. Technology is not there. You have the big techs a lot of times suppressing these messaging. But what would you tell these, younger generation or students, say, what are they able to do to kind of take matters into their own hands, right? What can
Yeah.
they do, how can they assemble or build something that could contribute to this particular cause in solving this microplastic crisis?
Yeah. People always underestimate students, but everybody underestimates the power they actually have.
Yeah.
Because when you look at the world, you think, oh, there's so many people, and the big tech companies have money, and they have this and they have that. And if you just start with speaking the truth, just to your friends, to anybody else, just get on social media. If you have a company that you are a fan of, right? Meaning I buy their products and I like them. I happen to like my Apple iPhone a lot and I use an Apple computer, right? I can get on the Apple website and tell them something, and I will just say, I have consumed your product since day one, and here's my opinion. Now, if they get that from just one person, they might be free to ignore it. But if then another and then another, pretty soon it's those little drops of water that start to add up, to a creek and then a river and then an ocean, and then it becomes overwhelming. So I think people always, students always say this to me, oh, you've been so successful. Look at all the things you've done in your life. And I'm like, yeah, but I was just you guys when I started. I had some ideas and I had some drive. And the only thing that differentiates me from everybody else has nothing to do with how smart I am. It's that I didn't give up, right? That
Yeah.
I said, you know what? I'm going to do this. I'm going to do the right thing and I'm going to keep doing it till it wins. And then pretty soon you find out, oh, there's other people joining me. And then pretty soon it becomes an army joining you, right? So I'd say start something small. Look around you at what you can do. How can I get rid of plastic in my own life today? And believe me, there's something you can do today to get rid of it. Go buy it. Go buy a reusable metal water thing. Don't ever buy another. I have not bought a plastic bottle of water in 5 years, right? Stick that thing in my backpack. It doesn't weigh anything. I have it in my briefcase. I can use that thing all the time.
Yeah.
That's one, right? Two, start to talk to your friends about this and start to get little clubs together. You'll find out that there's a big community that thinks just like you. And the internet has made it super easy to find them. Also makes it easy to find the wackos, the TikTok videos of sharks eating people. I don't know, you can see all kinds of stuff. But you will find a community of your peers out there if you look, and it's pretty easy to find them nowadays. And then start to aggregate together with those guys, with people who are like-minded, who want to get something accomplished. Start with a small little thing. Even when I attack a science project or when I attack a collaboration, I will have a collaboration with one of the 10 biggest companies in the world. Never do I go in there and say, let's change all of your products to Soleic tomorrow. We say the same thing every time. Let's start with a single product that you think is really cool, that you think your customers would appreciate this in it, and let's be successful with that. Because if we're successful with a little thing, then the next time we'll be successful with a bigger one, and we'll grow it. And pretty soon, before you know it, you're like, oh my God, this is an entire movement. I've changed an entire industry. I'm fully convinced that we're going to do that with our polyurethanes, right?
Incredible. I think this is the perfect message for us to wrap today.
Good.
Thank you, Steve. Steve is the founder of Algenesis, the maker of the first biodegradable PU material, Soleic. Thank you, Steve, and I'm glad to have you here in this rabbit hole with me.
Thanks, Lawrence. It's good fun talking to you.